So here is the Coast Guard marching song we sing on land or sea. Through surf and storm and howling gale, high shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame, our glory too. To fight, to save, or fight, to die, aye, Coast Guard, we are for you. So here is the Coast Guard battle song. We fight on land or sea, through howling gale and shot and shell to win our victory. Semper Paratus is our guide, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready, do or die, aye, Coast Guard, we are for you. We're always ready for the call, we place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, high shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame, our glory too. To fight, to save, or fight, to die, aye, Coast Guard, we are for you. We're always ready for the call, we place our trust in thee. Through howling gale and shot and shell to win our victory. Semper Paratus is our guide, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready, do or die, aye, Coast Guard, we are for you.
The United States Coast Guard is unique among nations. No other military organization in the world is called upon to perform such a wide variety of tasks or so many varied services. Certainly, the Coast Guard has played a role in history which greatly exceeds its standing as the smallest of our armed forces. If the many duties of the Coast Guard can be condensed into three categories, they are the preservation of life and property at sea, the enforcement of maritime law, and the maintenance of military readiness. In fulfilling these charges for almost 200 years, Coast Guard people have shown great talent, perseverance, and heroism. The deeds of these men and women are recorded in a long history of great achievement and proud tradition, a history that began when 13 small colonies rebelled against a domineering monarch to form a new nation. In the first decade following the Revolution, the young country found itself deep in a post-war economic depression. Facing heavy debts incurred during the war, the new Congress passed a tariff law in 1789, taxing imported goods. Almost immediately, large-scale smuggling sprang up, and America's largest single source of desperately needed income was threatened. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of Treasury, requested that Congress authorize the purchase of 10 small boats, properly manned and armed, to fight the smuggling. Congress responded, providing funding for the boats, and, at Hamilton's insistence, authorizing that their officers and crews be given full military standing. The name of the tiny new force was the Revenue Marine. In her early years, the Revenue Marine began many traditions which formed the foundation of the modern Coast Guard. In 1798, 8 cutters joined with the fledgling U.S. Navy in battle against French privateers. Today, military readiness remains a primary Coast Guard mission. The greatest Coast Guard tradition began in 1831, when 7 cutters were assigned to winter patrol duty, aiding ships in distress. Thus began the work for which the Coast Guard would become famous, the saving of life and property at sea. Also, during the early 1800s, the mission of the Revenue Marine expanded with the acquisition of California in the Mexican War and with the passage of many new laws. One of the new laws, whose enforcement fell to the Revenue Marine, prohibited the import of slaves. The issue of slavery, bitterly debated since the Philadelphia Conventions before the Revolution, had never been settled. In April 1861, the Southern states seceded from the Union, and America burst into a terrible, bloody civil war. Following the Civil War, the Alaska Patrol was added to the mission of the Revenue Marine. At about this same time, the Marine began to be known as the Revenue Cutter Service. During these years, Congress granted federal funds and formal recognition to a century-old network of coastal life-saving stations, creating the Life-Saving Service. Duty in the life-saving service was difficult and hazardous, teaching men early the truth of the old saying, "The rules say you have to go out. They don't say you have to come back." The sinking of the Titanic in 1912 added ice patrol to the duties of the Revenue Cutter Service. Then, in 1915, Congress combined the Revenue Cutter Service and the Life-Saving Service, naming the new organization The United States Coast Guard. The newly named Coast Guard served with great distinction in World War I. In one action, a British naval vessel, the Cowslip, was torpedoed while traveling in convoy. Immediately, a Coast Guard cutter, the Seneca, pulled alongside. Despite a concentration of enemy submarines, the Seneca stood by, rescuing 81 British sailors from the Cowslip. This action, and one other, in which Seneca lost 11 men trying to save another British ship, drew the following official response from the British Admiralty. Seldom in the annals of the sea has there been exhibited such cool courage in the face of almost insurmountable difficulty. America is to be congratulated. Though the Coast Guard saved many lives during the war, she also sacrificed greatly. The Seneca gave up 11 men, and in one of the worst disasters of the war, the entire crew of the Tampa, 115 men, was lost when she was sunk by an enemy torpedo. During World War I, the Coast Guard suffered higher losses proportionally than any other armed service. Peace there was, following the war to end all wars, but for far too short a time, lasting barely a generation. And soon, the Coast Guard found itself growing at an unprecedented rate to deal with the many new duties brought about by America's entry into World War II. Coast Guard men at sea were involved in active duty combat and convoy escort duty, while those at home supervised port security and the handling of explosive cargoes. To help meet the new challenges, particularly the home port and harbor duties, the temporary, permanent, and women's reserves were formed. These reservists, many of whom were essentially volunteers acting without pay, made it possible for the Coast Guard to fulfill her wartime mission with award-winning success. At last, the war ended in 1945, and all America celebrated together. Since World War II, the Coast Guard has rendered distinguished service in Korea and Vietnam, while at the same time continuing to modernize. In 1967, the Coast Guard was transferred to the Department of Transportation, adopting distinctive new uniforms a few years later. Just a few of the many 20th century responsibilities of the Coast Guard include the protection of marine life, overseeing the 200-mile commercial fishing limit, carrying out oceanographic research, the interdiction of illegal drugs, and containing pollution spills. And the Coast Guard's traditional responsibilities of maintaining military readiness and protecting property at sea have grown every year in this century. At this point in her history, the Coast Guard has recovered over $400 billion in cargoes.